future is Asian because demographically the world is already Asian. More than 50% of the world population lives in Asia. And as the world population plateaus somewhere around, but perhaps less than 10 billion people, we will never live in a world where the majority of the world population is not Asians in Asia. Right? So we need to get used to that fact. Then there's the economy, especially if you measure in PPP terms, but even if you don't. Right, you have 35 to 40% of the global economy centered on the Asian realm. Thirdly, Asia is Asianizing. So these major Asian economic powers, and not only that, the major markets to which Western companies want to export and do business in, are actually already trading more with each other than they are with the rest of the world. So if you want to be a successful global company, you cannot actually make the statement, I am a successful global company, unless you are a big deal in Asia. Right? So it's the present that's already Asian based on that data, and that's ever more the case the further you look into the future. For 500 years prior to 1990, right, Asia was more or less divided or getting divided by colonial powers and by the Cold War. No one alive today can remember the last Silk Road era, right, of the 14th, 15th century, and yet that is what is being recreated now. It was only possible because of the end of colonialism and the end of the Cold War. So we can all of us are alive or have been alive to witness these last 3 decades. And while we've been paying attention to a lot of other things, whether it's the war on terror or whatever the case may be, the fact is that Asia has been very steadily, very diligently integrating. And the first milestone in that was the energy supercycle, right? High commodities prices, West Asian, meaning Middle East, Persian Gulf oil and gas exports flowing across the Indian Ocean to the Far East. Now West Asia trades much more with East Asia than it does with any of its former colonial masters. Then you have Asian economies going through and surviving the financial crisis due to their economic integration. Now you have the Belt and Road Initiative. And Belt and Road is just the beginning of that whole next phase of Asia's integration through infrastructure, through the 20 trade agreements that are being negotiated between Asian countries, rising volumes of foreign investment, local currency debt and growing cross-border liquidity, trade finance. All of these things are helping Asians just rediscover and exploit the very natural complementarities that they have. We live in a globalized world, and yet we have a great intellectual divergence underway, really, between the kind of slow growth, inward-looking, xenophobic, pessimistic, anti-trade and globalization West, and the optimistic, forward-looking, the world's getting better, bring borders down, pro-globalization Asia, right? That's literally a caricature, but it's not that far off. You know, you have pro-globalization and pro-trade support across the vast spectrum of societies in Asia. You have actually a lot of support for leadership, right? Executive branches, executive authorities and leaders enjoy a very high degree of public trust. And that's also in the democracies, in fact, particularly in the democracies. If you look at India, Indonesia, the Philippines, 1.8 billion people in those 3 countries that are all having elections, you know, this year. Regions of the world get into this sweet spot. You know, for Europe, it was obviously the Industrial Revolution era, and then it came again in the post-war decades, given the need to rehabilitate, right? So Asian countries are in that sweet spot now, where the forces are aligning between the interest of global capital markets, and geopolitical stability, but also the demographic wave and boost, the infrastructure investment, and the quality leadership. All of those things are coming together quite nicely in Asia right now.